And today is a bit of an auspicious day for our Sangha. Today is the last day that we get to share a bit of a Dharma talk on the topic of Mudita. Tomorrow is Thursday, so we're going to begin by sitting together and then having our breakout rooms and have the opportunity to sit together in smaller groups and share and hear with each other. And then Friday, we do our silent sit. Next week, we will be on revisiting, always worth revisiting, the topic of the holding environment. And then we'll be moving the following week into the fourth of the four Brahmaviharas, Upekkha, equanimity. So we get to visit Mudita again today, and of course, metta and karuna and mudita are not things that we're saying goodbye to, but we're moving through the year, and I can't believe how quickly things are moving for us. Wow. So when I sat down to give some thought to what I want to share about today, I thought, it would be really lovely to provide a recap of all the various points and teachings and lessons and insights that have been shared on Mudita. And then very quickly, I realized that this is a bit of a grand and grandiose attempt. How in the world I'm going to, in 10 or 15 minutes or so, possibly cover everything that my fellow teachers and myself, we have been talking about over months. Not really possible. So I let go of that. And I asked myself, what feels alive for me in connecting and relating with Mudita for now? And as it turns out, it feels like a bit of a nice recap on Mudita. So Mudita, typically translated as appreciative joy. And this always feels a bit awkward and clumsy to me, like compassion, simple, equanimity, simple, appreciative joy. It doesn't quite resonate in just the term. So we have to get behind those words and really connect with it in a very personal way. So I think that the most helpful way for me to connect with Mudita is to begin with metta, and to remember, to recall that metta is the practice that's the foundation of all the Brahmaviharas. And then compassion and appreciative joy, karuna and mudita, are simply metta as they respond to specific conditions, particular conditions, namely, specifically, the conditions of meeting and encountering another being. So metta is personified in interpersonal dynamics through karuna and mudita. And they're not really separate practices at all. And then finally, equanimity. Equanimity is a combination of all of those three Brahmaviharas together with insight. And of course, we'll talk plenty about that over the coming months. Oftentimes, metta is translated as loving kindness. I also like personally to use the term kind friendliness. For me, loving connotes like I have to love, I have to have this feeling of love, like something, or automatically it induces like a bit of a striving in me. Oh, I have to feel something and connect with something much bigger or more intense than what I happen to be thinking and feeling right now. So I dial it back a little bit. I lower that intensity for myself. I can relate with kind friendliness pretty easily if I'm willing to, if I'm interested in doing so. It feels more accessible for me. And metta is really about friendliness. It's not about friendship. It's not about being really connected to all beings as if that was really possible anyway. but it's about training ourselves to be friendly to all beings. And I can be friendly to all beings if I choose to, even when I don't feel like it. If I'm having a headache, or I'm feeling hungry, or tired, or cranky, or irritable, I can still choose to turn toward friendliness in my actions, in my choices. And this is metta. And when we begin to practice with metta, we begin to access any sense of friendliness that might be available for us. In the past, we've talked about using the analogy, the imagery of the kindling of the fire, beginning with something small, some little pieces of paper, and setting them aflame. And eventually we can build from there. We can gently blow on that and feed that fire, feed those flames to create something strong and big and powerful. And these are not just instructions for metta, these are guidances. These are guidance practices for compassion and for mudita. So in compassion, I can check in with myself and say, can I care right now? Can I turn towards this awareness of another being experiencing difficulty or hardship or challenge or pain and care? And that's the beginning of compassion, right there. And in the face of mudita, I see somebody rejoicing, somebody experiencing good fortune. Can I care about this? Especially if it's somebody neutral to me or somebody that I'm particularly not so positively inclined toward. But can I care? Can I appreciate? And that's the beginning of mudita right there. Oftentimes, I think that we can think about and we can try to practice and cultivate the Brahmaviharas and have a little bit of too much of an emphasis on the emotions of it. And the great wisdom in these practices is that when we incline our mind, when we incline our intention in a heartful way, because we want to be that kind of human being, because that's what matters to us, we are cultivating the Brahmaviharas. And what we're actually feeling in the moment, emotionally, how much it's resonating for us, how much we're connected to it, is really secondary. And if we can let go of that, which I think oftentimes is a form of striving, it's a form of grasping, then we can see how the emotional experience of cultivating appreciative joy, cultivating compassion, cultivating metta, naturally develops. It follows. It follows from inclining the heart and the mind toward the development of these qualities. They become the manifestations, they become the consequences of these practices. Yesterday, we have 5 boys. Our youngest is 6. Yesterday, we had another boy of the puppy variety. So now we have 6 boys. My sons have named this beautiful, cute little puppy Duncan, because they came up with the idea at a gas station, at a rest stop, on the way home from vacation, which also had a Dunkin' Donuts. So he's Duncan, D-U-N-K-I-N. And of course, my kids were so excited. And this was quite an adventure, getting this puppy. I discovered that there's a whole world of people out there seeking to take advantage of people like me who don't really have any prior experience with getting puppies and dogs and scamming them. I had some unsavory encounters, some hard-earned wisdom learned along the way. So this was like a real buildup, a real process, until he finally came home yesterday. And my kids were so excited, counting down the days. My 6-year-old every morning the past couple of weeks would say, how many days are we getting the puppy? How many days is Duncan coming home? And I was excited too. a bit for myself, and definitely for them. But it was fascinating to see the process unfold for my wife. She never really considered herself an animal person. And the idea of we have fish, but they're in their fish tank. The idea of having a furry, crawling, wiggling, yapping thing up against her legs was not something that immediately evoked warm and fuzziness for her. But she did this for the kids. We really both felt that this was an important time for them. It would be really, really good for them and healing for some of them. So Duncan came home and he's in his pen. He's literally a puppy. He needs to stay enclosed for a while in a relatively small space. And my third son climbed in and sat with Duncan and played with him. And then my fourth son got in and climbed in and played with him. And then my youngest climbed in and of course got a little scared and skittish and jumped out. And then my wife climbed in and sat with him. Totally took us all by surprise. And I took a picture of her sitting with Duncan on her lap. And I said to her later that evening, I said, that picture is like the perfect personification of Mudita. Because it was completely, all her joy, all of her happiness was completely being driven by her love and her care and her open-heartedness towards what's best for other human beings. Yeah. And those of us that have experienced the joy of parenting and ownership of pets and parenting pets, we can relate to how easy it is to access that when we love so dearly that other being. In everyday life, in more ordinary moments, this isn't so automatically and easily accessible. But we cultivate. And we cultivate. And we just sit down and we allow ourselves to settle. And sometimes it's just something as simple as asking ourselves, you know, what matters to me? What's important to me? Oh yeah, this is the kind of human being I really value being. And this is really me. This is really my true nature. All these habits of reactivity and conditionings get in the way. That's the practice. Of course, as I finished preparing some of these words, it felt to me so incomplete. I was talking about Mudita and talking about metta and karuna. There's so many different ways. The wisdom, the brilliance of the Eightfold Path of these practices are that everything is interconnected. All these practices are interconnected with each other. I want to end by sharing a poem with you, and then I'll put the name of the poem into the chat afterward. And then we'll practice together. Practicing again, turning our mind and our heart towards that which is dear to us and important to us. I would like my living to inhabit me, the way rain, sun, and their wanting inhabit a fig or apple. I would like to meet it also in pieces, scattered. A conversation set down on a long hallway table. A disappointment pocketed inside a jacket. Some long ago longing glimpsed, half recognized, in the corner of a thrift store painting. To discover my happiness, walking first toward, then away from me, down a stairwell, on two strong legs, all its own. Also, the uncountable wheat stalks. How many times broken, beaten, sent between grindstones before entering the marriage of oven and bread. Let me find my life in that too. In my moments of clumsiness, solitude, in days of vertigo and hesitation, in the many year ends that found me standing on top of a stovetop to take down a track light. In my nights asked, sometimes answered questions. I would like to add to my life, while we are still living, a little salt and butter. One more slice of the edible apple. A teaspoon of jam from the long simmered fig. To taste as if something tasted for the first time what we will have become then. To taste as if something tasted for the first time what we will have become then. Thank you. Okay, so moving into stretching out the body, shaking out the body, but seeing this as a practice of intention. Feeling into the body. What's it asking for right now, right here? Partially because of the adventures and efforts taken in finding Duncan, and partially for other reasons of the fullness and the hecticness of life. I didn't really do my regular physical exercise the past couple of weeks. And when I came back to it earlier this week, my body was like yelling at me, yes, you can't forget me. I forget so easily. Okay. So without any sense of rush, allowing ourselves to settle into the posture for today's sitting. And with eyes open or closed, whatever feels more supportive. And if the eyes are open, just allowing them to have a soft gaze, not particularly focused on anything or anyone. And turning inward, greeting ourselves. I always evoke the memory of Bill sharing how he turns to himself and setting up his practice and says, hey, buddy, or hey, sweetie, hey, honey. And right there, gratitude wells up inside me for teachers and teachings that are so skillful and important. How can we really begin a practice like this any other way? allowing ourselves to open to any sense, any thought, any imagery, anything right now that we're connected to that has a quality of care and kindness. And seeing that as the beginning of a beautiful, powerful fire. Seeing what it's like to take a receptive posture, which means we just sit back and receive whatever experience arises right here, right now. We're not seeking something specifically, just opening ourselves to receiving with awareness. While holding like we hold something dear and precious. Perhaps a gem, or a little adorable puppy, or a baby. Just holding that sense of kindness and care in that way. As we see into the experiences that arise, thoughts, sensations in the body, and emotions. And taking the time to practice presence. Out of the deep wisdom of appreciating that everything that happens here and now, and only here and always here and now. tasting this experience, this moment, as if tasting it for the first time. This interplay of the qualities of metta and mindful awareness. The heart and the mind. When the attention wanders, returning either to the felt sense of this heartful quality that we're holding so gently and caringly, or the actual felt sense of breathing right now, or sound, the experience of hearing, but returning is always available, all the time. In that same kind, friendly way that we began by saying, "Hi, buddy," or "Hi, honey" to ourselves. In that same way, we also know we can return anytime. Just come back to presence. And in the same way that we could return attention to being present anytime. And if we begin to be aware that the sense of the heartful quality of kindness, of care, seems like it's cooling down or shutting down, what can be supportive? Without forcing or straining, certainly without judging. When we find that the heart is protected, there's good reason for that. There's always good reason for that. You can just appreciate that. To this experience and to this moment, we too get to turn to it and say, yes, you're welcome. You make space for this too. Another term that's used in the understanding of the qualities of metta is goodwill. Not just kindness and friendliness and love, but goodwill. So consider the gongs to have gone off. Something went wrong with my gonger and it didn't gong. Thank you all for your practice and for your practice.